Mom taught me not to keep what isn't mine." The little girl's voice echoed through the imposing lobby of Kelly Industries, making the billionaire CEO freeze in place. Irwin Kelly, a 34-year-old man accustomed to multi-million-dollar negotiations, looked down to see a blonde 7-year-old girl wearing a faded pink dress and worn shoes, holding out his Italian leather wallet with over $500 inside. His eyes widened. The wallet he hadn't even realized was missing. The money, all there. Every single cent untouched. "You didn't take anything?" Irwin asked, his voice catching, barely able to believe what he was seeing. "Of course not, sir," Natalie replied with absolute innocence, her blue eyes shining with pure honesty. "It's not mine." In that moment, something inside the widowed CEO's broken heart began to awaken. For 3 years, since losing his wife Irene to cancer, he had buried himself in work and sorrow, convinced that goodness had died in the world. But here stood a poor child who clearly desperately needed that money, returning every cent without hesitation. He didn't know it yet, but this little girl with pigtails was about to change his life forever. Because when Irwin drove Natalie home and met her mother, Michelle, a 27-year-old woman struggling alone to raise her daughter after being abandoned by her partner, he found something he thought he had lost forever, a reason to live again. But not everything would be a fairy tale. Natalie's biological father, driven by greed, would return demanding money and threatening to destroy the family they were building. And on a sunny day at the park, he would attempt something unthinkable. This is the story of how a simple act of honesty saved not just a wallet, but 3 broken hearts. Before we continue with the story, tell us where you're watching from and how old you are. I hope you enjoy the story. The afternoon sun beat down on the cracked sidewalks of East Tampa, casting long shadows between the weathered buildings that lined the street. 7-year-old Natalie Hughes skipped along the pavement, her blonde pigtails bouncing with each step, humming a tune she had learned at school that morning. Her pink dress, faded from countless washes and patched at the hem by her mother's careful hands, swirled around her knees as she moved. The fabric had once been bright and cheerful, but time and hardship had dulled its color, much like the circumstances of her young life. Natalie's bright blue eyes sparkled with the innocent joy that only children possess, that remarkable ability to find happiness in the smallest things, a butterfly landing on a flower, the way the sunlight danced through the leaves, the simple pleasure of being alive on a beautiful day. She had just left her neighbor, Mrs. Patterson's apartment, where she spent her afternoons after school while her mother worked. The elderly woman was kind, but Natalie always felt a hollow ache in her chest during those long hours, missing her mother, wishing they could spend more time together like the families she saw on television. As she rounded the corner onto her street, something on the ground caught her attention. There, half hidden beneath a bus stop bench, was a wallet. Not just any wallet, but a beautiful black leather one that gleamed even in the dusty afternoon light. It looked expensive, the kind of thing that belonged to someone important, someone from a different world than the one Natalie knew. Her small fingers reached down and picked it up. The leather felt soft and supple, unlike anything she had touched before. Her heart began to race with a mixture of excitement and uncertainty. Natalie looked around, hoping to see someone frantically searching for their lost possession, but the street was empty except for a few passing cars and a stray cat sunning itself on a nearby stoop. With careful hands, she opened the wallet. Her eyes widened to the size of saucers. Inside were crisp bills, more money than she had ever seen in her life. She counted them silently, her lips moving. $10, $20, $30, $50 bills, maybe 8 or 9 of them. Her breath caught in her throat. This was more money than her mother made in a week of scrubbing floors and cleaning toilets. With this money, they could pay the rent that was already 2 weeks late. They could buy groceries that lasted more than a few days. Maybe, just maybe, they could even get her mother that warm coat she had been eyeing at the thrift store, the one she said was too expensive. But Natalie saw her looking at longingly every time they passed by. For a moment, just a brief, fleeting moment, Natalie felt the weight of temptation. Her fingers trembled as they touched the bills. She thought about her mother's tired face when she came home from work, the way Michelle's shoulders sagged with exhaustion, The lines of worry etched around her eyes. She thought about the times they had eaten plain rice for dinner because that was all they could afford, about the way her mother cried quietly at night when she thought Natalie was asleep, about the constant fear of eviction that hung over their small apartment like a dark cloud. But then, as clearly as if Michelle were standing right beside her, she heard her mother's voice in her head, gentle but firm, the words she had repeated countless times since Natalie was old enough to understand. Baby girl, we may not have much, but we have our integrity. We have our honesty. Never ever take what doesn't belong to you. It doesn't matter how much we need it. That money isn't ours, and taking it would make us thieves. We're better than that. We're honest people, and no amount of hardship will change that. Natalie's fingers moved away from the cash. Her mother was right. She was always right. This wasn't their money, and it would be wrong to keep it no matter how much they needed it, no matter how much it could help them. The thought of disappointing her mother, of betraying the values Michelle had worked so hard to instill in her, was far worse than any hardship they might face. With renewed determination, Natalie looked through the rest of the wallet's contents. There were several cards, credit cards with names embossed in gold lettering, a driver's license with a photo of a handsome man with brown hair and serious eyes, and a business card that was thick and expensive-looking. She pulled out the business card and studied it carefully, her young mind working to sound out the words. Irwin Kelly, she read slowly, Chief Executive Officer, Kelly Industries. The address was in downtown Tampa, in one of those tall glass buildings she had seen from afar but never entered. The kind of building that seemed to touch the clouds, where important people made important decisions. Natalie made up her mind. She would return this wallet to its owner. She would do what her mother taught her, what was right regardless of the cost. She carefully tucked the wallet into her small backpack, the one with the broken zipper that her mother had mended with safety pins, and began walking toward the bus stop. She had a few dollars in her pocket, lunch money that her mother had given her that morning, money that was supposed to last her the week for snacks. But this was more important. She would use it for bus fare to get downtown. The bus ride took 40 minutes, and with each passing mile, Natalie felt her nervousness grow. She watched through the grimy window as the landscape changed, from the familiar modest homes and small shops of her neighborhood to larger buildings, cleaner streets, and finally to the gleaming skyscrapers of downtown Tampa. The buildings seemed impossibly tall, glass and steel monuments to success and wealth that made her feel very small and out of place. When the bus stopped at her destination, Natalie stepped off onto a sidewalk that sparkled with cleanliness. Everything here was different, shinier, newer, better. Men and women in expensive suits rushed past her, their shoes clicking on the pavement, their faces focused and important. Nobody seemed to notice the little girl in the faded pink dress, standing there with her worn backpack and wide eyes full of wonder and apprehension. She looked up at the building before her. The Kelly Industries tower stretched toward the sky, all reflective glass that mirrored the blue Florida sky and white clouds. The entrance was flanked by massive granite columns, and through the revolving doors she could see a lobby that looked like something from a palace. For a moment, Natalie's courage faltered. Maybe she should just leave the wallet with the security guard. Maybe she didn't belong in a place like this. But no, she had come this far, and she needed to do this properly, to return the wallet directly to its owner. Taking a deep breath, Natalie pushed through the heavy revolving door. The lobby was even more impressive from inside. The floor was polished marble that reflected everything like a mirror, so shiny she could see her own reflection, a small, shabby figure in this temple of wealth and power. The walls were adorned with modern art that she didn't understand, but knew must be expensive. A massive chandelier hung from the ceiling, its crystals catching the light and throwing rainbows across the walls. Everything smelled clean and new, like money and success, so different from the musty scent of her apartment building. Her worn sneakers squeaked against the marble as she approached the reception desk, where a woman sat behind a sleek computer monitor. The receptionist was beautiful, with perfectly styled auburn hair, flawless makeup, and a crisp white blouse that probably cost more than Natalie's entire wardrobe. She wore a nameplate that read, Jennifer Sullivan, and was typing rapidly on her keyboard, her manicured nails clicking against the keys. Natalie stood before the tall desk, barely able to see over the top. She waited patiently, as her mother had taught her, not wanting to interrupt. But the woman didn't notice her at first, too engrossed in whatever she was working on. Finally, Natalie cleared her throat softly. "Excuse me, ma'am?" Jennifer looked up and her perfectly shaped eyebrows rose in surprise. Her eyes swept over Natalie, taking in the faded dress, the worn shoes, the mended backpack, and Natalie could see the judgment in her gaze, the question of what a child like her was doing in a place like this. "Can I help you?" Jennifer's tone was polite but cool, with an undertone that suggested Natalie didn't belong there. "Yes, please," Natalie said, trying to make her voice sound confident and grown up. "I need to speak with Mr. Irwin Kelly. It's very important." Jennifer's expression shifted to one of barely concealed amusement. "Mr. Kelly is a very busy man, sweetheart. He doesn't have time for walk-ins. Perhaps if you tell me what this is about, I can direct you to the appropriate department." "It's personal," Natalie insisted, clutching her backpack straps. "I really need to speak with him directly. Please. It's about something he lost." Something in the child's earnest blue eyes must have touched Jennifer, or perhaps it was simply curiosity about what this odd little girl could possibly want with the CEO. She sighed and picked up her phone. "Mr. Kelly, I apologize for the interruption, but there's a young girl here in the lobby who insists on speaking with you personally. She says it's about something you lost." There was a pause. "Yes, sir. A child, maybe 7 or 8 years old. She seems quite determined." Another pause. "Yes, sir. I'll tell her." Jennifer hung up and looked at Natalie with new surprise. "He's coming down. You can wait over there by the seating area." Natalie walked to the plush leather chairs that lined one wall, but she didn't sit. Her dress was old and might be dirty, and she didn't want to soil the expensive furniture. Instead, she stood, clutching her backpack, watching the elevator doors with growing nervousness. What would she say? Would he be angry? Would he think she had stolen the wallet and was only returning it because she got scared? The elevator chimed, and the polished steel doors slid open. Out stepped a man who could only be Irwin Kelly. He was tall, probably 6 feet, with neatly trimmed brown hair that had just a touch of gray at the temples. His navy suit was impeccably tailored, fitting him perfectly and speaking of wealth and taste. A Rolex watch gleamed on his wrist, catching the light from the chandelier above. He was handsome in a sharp professional way, with a strong jaw and intelligent eyes. But it was those eyes that struck Natalie most. They were a deep brown, almost black, and they held a sadness that seemed to contradict the success evident in everything else about him. They were the eyes of someone who had forgotten how to smile, someone who had seen too much pain. Even a 7-year-old could sense the profound melancholy that clung to him like a shadow. Irwin's gaze swept the lobby, clearly looking for whoever had summoned him from his office, probably expecting an adult. When his eyes landed on Natalie, confusion flickered across his face. He approached slowly, his expensive leather shoes clicking on the marble. "Hello," he said, his voice deep and measured. "I'm Irwin Kelly. Jennifer said you needed to speak with me?" Natalie swallowed hard and nodded. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened her backpack and pulled out the black leather wallet. She held it up to him, her arms extended in offering. "I found this on the street near my house, Mr. Kelly. I saw your name and address inside, so I came to return it. My mom always taught me not to keep what isn't mine." For a long moment, Irwin just stared at the wallet, then at the girl, then back at the wallet. He took it from her small hands, his fingers brushing against hers, and opened it. His eyes widened slightly as he examined the contents. Everything was there, every card, every dollar, completely untouched. He pulled out the bills and counted them slowly. $540, the exact amount he remembered having. Not a single cent missing. His hands began to tremble slightly. In the 3 years since Irene's death, Irwin had become cynical, jaded. He had seen the worst of human nature in his boardrooms, witnessed people lie and cheat for far less than what was in this wallet. He had lost faith in goodness, in kindness, in the inherent decency of people. He had convinced himself that integrity was just a word people used but didn't practice, that everyone had their price, that honor was an antiquated concept from a bygone era, and here stood this child, this tiny girl with pigtails and a dress that had been mended multiple times, holding out his wallet like it was the most natural thing in the world. She wasn't expecting a reward. She wasn't looking for praise. She had simply done what she believed was right because her mother had taught her to be honest. You didn't take any of the money?" His voice was hoarse, as if speaking was difficult. He needed to hear her say it, needed to confirm that this wasn't some elaborate scheme, that this innocence was real. Natalie shook her head firmly, her pigtails swishing. "No, sir. That's your money, not mine. Taking it would be stealing, and my mama says stealing is wrong no matter what. She says our integrity is all we really own, and nobody can take that away unless we give it away ourselves." Something in Erwin's chest cracked, a fissure in the wall he had built around his heart. He felt a wave of emotion so powerful it nearly knocked him backward, a tsunami of feelings he had been suppressing for 3 years. Grief? Yes, but also something he hadn't felt in so long he barely recognized it. Hope. He looked at this little girl in her threadbare dress and worn shoes, clearly from a family that struggled to make ends meet, and she had found what amounted to several $100s and hadn't taken a single cent. In his world of corporate betrayals, insider trading, and people who would sell their souls for far less, this child's honesty shone like a beacon. Erwin's mind flashed to Irene. She had believed in goodness, too. She had always seen the best in people, had always maintained that kindness and integrity mattered more than wealth or status. He had loved that about her, even as her optimism sometimes frustrated his more pragmatic nature. And she had been so excited about becoming a mother, about raising children with strong values, about teaching them to be good people in a world that often wasn't good. "If we have children," Irene had said one night, curled up beside him in their bed, her hand resting on her stomach in anticipation of a pregnancy that would never come, "I want to teach them that character matters, that doing the right thing, even when it's hard, is what defines us. Money comes and goes, success is fleeting, but integrity that lasts forever." Looking at Natalie now, Erwin felt like he was seeing Irene's dream made manifest. This was the kind of child they would have raised together. This was the kind of person they had wanted to bring into the world. And even though he and Irene hadn't gotten that chance, here was proof that people like Michelle existed. People who prioritized character over convenience, who raised their children with the values that truly mattered. Without thinking, Erwin knelt down, bringing himself to Natalie's eye level. Up close he could see the innocence in her blue eyes, the slight nervousness in the way she fidgeted with her dress, the sincerity radiating from her, and in that moment something he thought had died 3 years ago stirred in his heart. "What's your name, sweetheart?" he asked gently. "Natalie Hughes, sir. I'm 7 years old. I go to East Tampa Elementary." "Well, Natalie Hughes, that is quite possibly the most honest thing anyone has done for me in years, maybe ever." Erwin felt his eyes beginning to sting with tears, something that hadn't happened since Irene's funeral. "Your mother must be very proud of you." Natalie's face brightened with a smile that transformed her entire appearance. "Mama works really hard. She's a cleaner. She cleans offices and houses. Sometimes she works 2 or 3 jobs in one day. We don't get to see each other as much as I'd like, but when we do, she always makes sure to teach me important things, like being honest and being kind and never giving up, even when things are hard." "She sounds like a remarkable woman," Erwin said softly. His mind was racing, piecing together the picture of this child's life. The worn clothes, the mention of multiple jobs, the obvious poverty. Yet her mother had instilled such strong values that this little girl had traveled across the city to return money they clearly desperately needed. "And your father? Is he at home?" The light in Natalie's eyes dimmed slightly. "I don't have a daddy. Well, I guess I do somewhere, but he left when I was 3. Mama says he wasn't a good man. He never calls or visits or sends money or anything. Sometimes I wish I had a daddy like the other kids at school, someone to play with and teach me things and protect us. But Mama says we're better off without him, and I believe her. She's never lied to me. Erwin felt his heart constrict painfully. This child, so pure and good, abandoned by her father, struggling with her mother just to survive, and yet she stood here in his lobby returning money they clearly needed. The unfairness of it all, the randomness of fate that had given him wealth and success and taken away his ability to have children, while this deserving woman and her daughter struggled, struck him with profound force. Natalie, I want to take you home. I need to meet your mother and thank her for raising such an incredible daughter. And I want to give you a reward for your honesty. Will you let me do that? Natalie hesitated. Her mother had always warned her about strangers, about getting into cars with people she didn't know. But something about this man felt safe. His eyes were sad, but they were kind, and he was the owner of the wallet, so technically he wasn't a complete stranger anymore. Okay, she agreed. But Mama's still at work. She won't be home until 6. Erwin checked his watch. It was 4:30. That's all right. I'll wait with you. Come on, my car is in the garage. He led her to the parking garage where a gleaming black Mercedes sat in a spot marked, Reserved CEO. Natalie had never been in such a fancy car. The leather seats were soft and smelled new, and there were screens and buttons everywhere. Erwin helped her with the seatbelt, his movements gentle and careful, and then they pulled out into the Tampa traffic. As they drove, Erwin asked Natalie questions about her life, her school, her friends, her dreams. She chattered away, her initial nervousness evaporating as she realized he was genuinely interested. She told him about her favorite teacher, Mrs. Anderson, who sometimes slipped her extra snacks when she thought no one was looking. She talked about her best friend Emma, and how they liked to play pretend princesses at recess. She confided that she wanted to be a teacher when she grew up, so she could help other kids learn. Mama says education is the most important thing, Natalie explained. She didn't get to finish high school because her family needed her to work, but she made me promise I'll always stay in school no matter what. She helps me with my homework every night, even when she's so tired she can barely keep her eyes open. Erwin listened, and with every word his admiration for Michelle Hughes grew, even though he hadn't met her yet. To raise a child like this alone, to work multiple jobs and still find the energy to help with homework, to instill such strong values despite their circumstances, that took a special kind of strength. They reached Natalie's neighborhood, and Erwin couldn't help but notice the stark contrast to the world he inhabited. The houses were small and shabby, many with peeling paint and overgrown yards. Some had bars on the windows. Trash littered some of the streets, but there were also signs of life and community, children playing basketball in driveways, neighbors chatting on front porches, a sense that people here looked out for each other because they had to. That's my house. Natalie pointed to a small, faded yellow house with a sagging front porch. The yard was tiny but neatly kept, with a few flowers struggling to bloom in the Florida heat. The house was clearly old and in need of repairs, but it was clean and maintained as well as possible, given limited resources. They pulled up to the curb, and as they got out of the car, Erwin heard something that made his heart sink. Through the thin walls of the house, he could hear crying, deep, wrenching sobs that spoke of despair and hopelessness. Natalie heard it too, and her face went pale. Mama. She ran to the door, struggling with the lock before finally getting it open. Erwin followed, his instincts screaming that something was very wrong. Inside, the house was small but impeccably clean. The furniture was old and mismatched, clearly secondhand, but everything was neat and organized. There were colorful drawings taped to the walls, Natalie's artwork, bringing brightness to the dim space. A small kitchen was visible to the left, and to the right was a tiny living room where a woman sat on a threadbare couch, her face buried in her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs. Mama! Natalie rushed to her mother, and the woman's head jerked up. Michelle Hughes was beautiful despite her tears and obvious exhaustion. She had blonde hair like her daughter's, though hers was pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her face was young, only 27, but already showed the marks of hardship, fine lines around her eyes, a thinness that spoke of skipped meals, an exhaustion that went bone deep. She wore jeans and a simple t-shirt, both clean but worn. Her hands were red and rough from years of harsh cleaning chemicals. When she saw Natalie, relief flooded her features, quickly followed by confusion as she noticed the tall, well-dressed man standing in her doorway. "Natalie, where have you been? I got home early and you weren't at Mrs. Patterson's and I was so worried." She stood quickly, instinctively moving between her daughter and the stranger. "Who are you? What are you doing in my house?" Erwin raised his hands in a peaceful gesture. "Mrs. Hughes, I'm sorry to intrude. My name is Erwin Kelly. Your daughter did something incredibly kind today, and I wanted to thank you both personally." Michelle's confusion deepened, but before she could respond, Natalie jumped in, her words tumbling over each other in excitement. "Mama, I found this man's wallet on the street. It had lots of money in it, but I remembered what you always say about not keeping what isn't ours. So I looked at his business card and took the bus downtown to his big office building and returned it, and he wanted to meet you and give me a reward." Michelle's hand flew to her mouth. "You took the bus downtown? By yourself? Natalie, that's so dangerous. You could have been hurt or lost or—" Her voice broke, and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "I'm sorry, Mama. I just wanted to do the right thing." Erwin stepped forward slightly. "Mrs. Hughes, please don't be angry with her. What she did was incredibly brave and honest. The wallet had several $100s in it, and she didn't take a single cent. In my world, that kind of integrity is, well, it's almost unheard of." Michelle looked at her daughter with a mixture of pride, fear, and overwhelming love. She pulled Natalie into a tight embrace, kissing the top of her head. "I'm not angry, baby. I'm proud of you. So proud. You did exactly what I taught you." She looked up at Erwin over her daughter's head. "I'm sorry, Mr. Kelly. Thank you for bringing her home safely. As you can see, we're having a difficult day and I wasn't thinking clearly." "What happened?" Erwin asked gently. "If I may ask." Michelle's face crumpled again. She guided Natalie to sit on the couch and sank down beside her, pulling her daughter close. "I lost my job today. The family I clean for 3 days a week, they're moving out of state, they told me this morning. That was nearly half my income. I don't know how I'm going to pay rent next week. I've been sitting here trying to figure out what to do, how to keep a roof over our heads." The desperation in her voice was heartbreaking. Erwin could see she was a woman at the end of her rope, fighting with everything she had to provide for her child, and terrified of failing. He made a decision in that moment, one that felt right in a way nothing had felt right since Irene died. "Mrs. Hughes, I own a large company. We have a significant facilities department that handles cleaning and maintenance for our offices. We're actually in need of new staff members right now. If you're interested, I'd like to offer you a position." Michelle's eyes widened in disbelief. You're offering me a job? Just like that?" "Just like that," Erwin confirmed. "Any woman who raises a daughter with the kind of integrity Natalie showed today deserves a chance. The position would be Monday through Friday, reasonable hours with benefits including health insurance. The pay is competitive, significantly more than most cleaning positions." "I don't know what to say," Michelle whispered, new tears streaming down her face, but these were tears of relief and hope. Thank you so much. Yes, I accept. When can I start?" "Tomorrow, if you're available. Come to the building at 8 a.m. Ask for Jennifer at the front desk. She'll get you set up with HR." Erwin reached into his wallet, the one Natalie had returned, and pulled out a crisp $100 bill. He held it out to Natalie. "And this is for you, sweetheart. A reward for your honesty." Natalie's eyes went round as saucers. She had never held a $100 bill before. She looked at her mother for permission, and Michelle nodded, smiling through her tears. "You can take it, baby. You earned it." Natalie took the bill with reverent care, as if it might disappear if she wasn't gentle enough. "Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Thank you so much." As Erwin prepared to leave, he paused at the door and turned back. "Mrs. Hughes, Natalie, you've both reminded me today that there's still goodness in this world, that there are still people with integrity and heart. I haven't felt hopeful about anything in a very long time. Thank you for giving me that gift." He left, climbing into his Mercedes and driving away. But as he navigated the Tampa streets back toward his empty mansion, he couldn't stop thinking about the little girl with pigtails and her hard-working mother. For the first time in 3 years, since the day Irene died, Irwin Kelly felt something stir in his chest that might have been hope. That night, lying in his king-sized bed in his sprawling, lonely mansion, Irwin stared at the ceiling and thought about the future. He thought about Irene, about the dreams they had shared, about the children they had planned to have. And for the first time since her death, he didn't feel only pain when he thought of those lost dreams. He felt something else, something that frightened him with its intensity. He felt possibility. In the small yellow house across town, Michelle tucked Natalie into her narrow bed, smoothing back her blonde hair and kissing her forehead. "I'm so proud of you, baby girl," she whispered. "You did the right thing today, even when it was hard. That's what makes you special." "Mama," Natalie murmured sleepily. Mr. Kelly seemed so sad. His eyes were sad. "I wish we could make him happy." Michelle smiled softly. "Maybe we can, sweetheart. Maybe we can." And as mother and daughter drifted off to sleep, neither could have imagined how their lives were about to change, how a simple act of honesty would lead to a love story that would transform them all, healing wounds they didn't even know could be healed, and creating a family from the most unexpected circumstances. The next morning, Michelle stood in front of her small closet, trying to decide what to wear for her first day. She settled on her nicest pair of black pants and a simple blue blouse, pressing them carefully with her old iron. Natalie sat on the bed, watching her mother get ready, excitement bubbling over. "You look beautiful, Mama," she said sincerely. Michelle smiled at her daughter in the mirror. "Thank you, baby. Now you be good for Mrs. Patterson today, okay? I'll pick you up right after school." The bus ride to downtown felt different this morning. Michelle watched the city transform around her, from familiar to foreign, and felt her nerves growing. What if she wasn't good enough? What if they realized she had only a 10th grade education? What if Mr. Kelly regretted his impulsive offer? But when she arrived at Kelly Industries and gave her name at the front desk, Jennifer greeted her with a professional smile and led her to the HR department. Within 2 hours, she had filled out paperwork, received her uniform, a set of comfortable polo shirts and pants in the company colors, and been given a tour of the facilities she would be maintaining. Her supervisor, a kind woman named Patricia Martinez, explained her duties and showed her the supply closets and equipment. "You'll be primarily responsible for the executive floors," Patricia explained. "Mr. Kelly specifically requested you be assigned there. It's actually a better position than most new hires start with." Michelle felt a surge of gratitude. She threw herself into her work with the dedication that had always defined her. She cleaned with meticulous care, paying attention to every detail, making sure everything was spotless. The other members of the cleaning staff were friendly and welcoming, and Michelle began to feel like maybe, just maybe, things were finally looking up. During her first week, she occasionally saw Irwin in passing. He would nod at her, and she would smile back, but they didn't really speak beyond brief greetings. He seemed consumed by his work, always rushing from one meeting to another, his phone constantly ringing, his expression serious and focused. But Michelle noticed something in his eyes when he looked at her, a softness that wasn't there when he looked at anyone else. Irwin, for his part, found himself hyper-aware of Michelle's presence in the building. He knew her schedule, knew which floors she would be cleaning at which times, and he found excuses to be in those areas. He told himself he was just checking on his new employee, making sure she was settling in well, but he knew it was more than that. There was something about her that drew him, a warmth, a genuineness that was rare in his world of corporate politics and fake smiles. It was during the second week that they had their first real conversation. Irwin had been working late, as he always did. At 8 p.m., his office was one of the few with lights still on. He heard a gentle knock on his open door and looked up to see Michelle standing there with her cleaning cart. "I'm sorry, Mr. Kelly," she said softly. "I can come back later if you're busy." No, it's fine. Come in and please call me Irwin." She smiled and began emptying his trash bin and dusting his bookshelves. Irwin watched her work, noting the efficiency of her movements, the care she took. She wasn't just going through the motions, she genuinely cared about doing a good job. "How's Natalie?" he asked, surprising himself with the question. Michelle's face lit up the way it always did when someone mentioned her daughter. "She's wonderful. She talks about you all the time, you know. About the nice man who gave her $100. She has it framed in her room. Won't spend a cent of it. Says it's special." Erwin felt his throat tighten. "She's a special kid. You've done an amazing job with her." "I try," Michelle said, spraying cleaner on his desk and wiping it down carefully. "It's not always easy, especially alone, but she makes it worthwhile. Every sacrifice, every hardship, it's all worth it when I see her smile." "You're doing it all alone?" Erwin heard himself asking. Natalie mentioned her father left. Michelle's expression hardened slightly. "Diego?" "Yes." "He left when Natalie was 3. Just packed up one day and disappeared. No note, no explanation, no child support. I haven't heard from him since. Honestly, good riddance. He wasn't a good person. Had a temper. Never hit us, but I always feared he might start. When he left, I was devastated at first. Then I realized we were better off. That must have been incredibly difficult." "It was. It is. But we manage. We have each other, and that's what matters." She paused in her cleaning and looked at him directly. "What about you, Mr. Erwin? Natalie mentioned you seemed sad. Are you okay?" The question, asked with such genuine concern, caught Erwin completely off guard. In his world, people didn't ask how he was feeling. They asked about quarterly earnings, about merger opportunities, about stock prices, but they never asked if he was okay. "I lost my wife 3 years ago," he found himself saying, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. "Cancer. It was fast, brutal. 6 months from diagnosis to the end. We had plans. We wanted children. We were going to start trying that year. And then she was gone. And all those dreams died with her." Michelle's eyes filled with compassion. She set down her cleaning supplies and moved closer, not touching him but close enough that he could see the genuine empathy in her expression. "I'm so sorry. That must have been devastating." "It was. It is. I threw myself into work because it was the only thing that made sense anymore. Numbers, deals, strategies, they're logical, predictable, unlike life, unlike love, unlike loss. But work isn't living," Michelle said softly. "I learned that the hard way. After Diego left, I worked myself to the bone, partly out of necessity but partly to avoid feeling anything. It was Natalie who taught me that life is still worth living, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Because the hard moments make the good ones that much sweeter." They talked for another hour, long after Michelle had finished cleaning his office. They talked about loss and love, about parenthood and dreams, about fear and hope. It was the first real conversation Erwin had had with anyone in years, the first time he had opened up about Irene, the first time he had admitted out loud how lonely he was. When Michelle finally left, wheeling her cart toward the elevators, Erwin sat back in his chair and realized he was smiling. Actually smiling. The sensation felt foreign, like a muscle he had forgotten how to use. Over the following weeks, these late-night conversations became a routine. Erwin found himself staying late at the office not because he had work to do, but because he wanted to talk to Michelle. They discovered they had more in common than their circumstances would suggest. They both loved old movies, particularly classic romantic comedies. They both had a weakness for chocolate chip cookies. They both believed in the power of education to change lives. Michelle told him about her dreams of going back to school someday, getting her GED and maybe even going to college. Erwin told her about his childhood, about growing up with wealth but without warmth, his parents more interested in social status than in their son. They were from completely different worlds, but in the quiet of those late nights with the city lights twinkling below his office windows, they found common ground. It was during the 4th week that Erwin worked up the courage to ask something that had been on his mind constantly. They were sitting in his office, he in his leather chair, she perched on the edge of his desk, both holding coffee cups, both more relaxed than either had been in years. "Michelle," he began, "I know this might be forward, but could I meet Natalie again? I mean, spend some real time with her. She seems like such a special kid, and I'd like to get to know her better." Michelle studied him carefully. She had learned to read people over the years. It was a survival skill she had developed. She looked for danger, for ulterior motives, for anything that might threaten her daughter. But when she looked at Erwin, she saw only genuine kindness and a deep, aching loneliness. "Why?" she asked simply. Erwin set down his coffee cup and ran his hands through his hair, a gesture of vulnerability she had never seen from him before. "Honestly? Because I think about the family I never got to have, the children Irene and I never got to meet. And when I met Natalie, when she showed such incredible character, I thought, if I had a daughter, I would want her to be just like that. I don't have any children in my life, Michelle. No nieces or nephews, no godchildren. And I realize I miss that potential, that possibility of being someone important to a child." Michelle felt her heart squeeze. She understood loss, understood longing, and she recognized the truth in his words. "Okay," she said softly. "Yes. Come by this Saturday. We usually spend Saturdays at the park. You could join us." Erwin's face transformed with joy. "Really? Thank you. Thank you so much." That Saturday dawned bright and clear, perfect Florida weather with blue skies and a gentle breeze. Erwin found himself more nervous than he had been for any board meeting or business negotiation. He changed his outfit 3 times, settling finally on jeans and a casual button-down shirt, wanting to look approachable rather than intimidating. He stopped at a toy store on the way, standing in the aisles feeling completely lost until a helpful saleswoman assisted him in selecting age-appropriate gifts. A beautiful doll with elaborate dresses, coloring books, a set of watercolor paints. When he arrived at the small yellow house, Natalie burst out the door before he could even knock. "Mr. Kelly, you came. You really came." She launched herself at him, and Erwin caught her, his arms wrapping around the small girl instinctively. The feeling of holding a child, of being trusted so completely, brought tears to his eyes. "Of course I came. I promised, didn't I?" Michelle appeared in the doorway, wearing jeans and a simple green t-shirt, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked younger, more relaxed than she did at work. "Come on, we're going to Bailey Park. It's nothing fancy, but Natalie loves the playground there." The park was indeed modest, with aging equipment and patchy grass, but it was filled with the sounds of children's laughter. Natalie immediately ran to the swings, calling for Erwin to push her. He obliged, positioning himself behind the swing, his hands on her small back. The first push was tentative, uncertain. He had never done this before, never pushed a child on a swing, never been responsible for another person's joy in this simple, physical way. But as Natalie squealed with delight, demanding, "Higher, push me higher," something awakened in Erwin. He pushed harder, finding a rhythm, and watched as she soared through the air, her pigtails streaming behind her, her laughter pure and uninhibited. Each time she swung back toward him, he could see the absolute trust in her eyes, the certainty that he would be there to push her forward again. She trusted him completely, this child who barely knew him, and that trust was both humbling and healing. "Look at me, Mr. Kelly. I'm flying, I'm actually flying," Natalie shouted, and Erwin realized he was smiling, truly smiling, the muscles in his face remembering how after 3 long years of disuse. "This," he thought, "this is what I've been missing. Not just fatherhood in the abstract, but these moments, these small, perfect moments of connection and joy. The weight of a child on a swing. The sound of her laughter. The simple act of helping someone else experience happiness." After what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, Natalie finally slowed down, dragging her feet to stop the swing. "That was amazing. Now can we go on the slide?" They spent the next hour exploring every piece of equipment in the playground. Erwin climbed to the top of the jungle gym with her, his expensive jeans getting dusty, his button-down shirt coming untucked. He slid down the slide, his tall frame barely fitting, making Natalie laugh until tears rolled down her cheeks. They played on the seesaw, Erwin carefully balancing his weight so Natalie could go up and down. In the sandbox, they built elaborate castles, complete with moats and towers, using old plastic buckets and spoons that other children had left behind. Michelle watched from her bench, her heart performing complicated gymnastics in her chest. She couldn't remember the last time she had seen her daughter this happy, this carefree. Natalie had friends at school, yes, but she was always slightly apart from them. The girl without a father, the girl whose clothes were never quite as nice, the girl who couldn't afford the field trips or the birthday parties at expensive venues. Here with Erwin, she wasn't the poor girl or the fatherless girl. She was just Natalie, a child being loved and played with and made to feel special. They spread out a blanket for a picnic lunch, sandwiches and fruit that Michelle had packed. Natalie sat between them chattering away about school, about her teacher, about the book she was reading. "I want to be a teacher when I grow up," she announced, "so I can help kids learn things. Mama says education is the most important thing." "Your mama is right," Erwin agreed. "Education opens doors. It gives you choices. What subject would you like to teach?" "Reading. I love reading. Books take you to different worlds. They let you be anyone, go anywhere. Even when you're stuck in the same place, books let you fly." The wisdom in her words, the poetry of them, struck both adults. Michelle reached out and smoothed her daughter's hair, pride and love shining in her eyes. Erwin watched the gesture, the tender way Michelle touched her daughter, and felt his heart expand. As the afternoon wore on and the sun began to lower, Natalie started to tire. She climbed into Erwin's lap as they sat on the blanket, her head resting against his chest. Michelle started to protest, to tell her daughter to give Mr. Kelly some space, but Erwin shook his head gently. "It's fine," he murmured. "More than fine." He wrapped his arms around the sleepy child, and Michelle watched as his eyes filled with tears. She understood. This was what he had lost when Irene died. This potential for family, for tender moments, for innocent love, and Natalie, in her generous heart, was giving him a glimpse of what could have been. When Natalie dozed off completely, Erwin carefully lifted her and carried her to his car. He drove them home, and when they arrived, he carried the sleeping girl inside and laid her gently on her bed. Michelle covered her with a blanket, and they both stood there for a moment, watching her sleep. Outside, on the small front porch, Michelle turned to Erwin. "Thank you. She hasn't been that happy in a long time. It was nice for her to have a father figure even just for an afternoon." "Thank you," Erwin countered. "I haven't felt that alive in years. She's incredible, Michelle. You're incredible. The way you've raised her, the values you've given her, the love, it's remarkable." Their eyes met and something passed between them, something electric and terrifying and wonderful. Michelle felt her breath catch. Erwin reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Can I see you both again?" he asked softly. "Not as your boss, but as a friend?" "Yes," Michelle whispered. "I'd like that." And so began a new chapter in all their lives. Erwin became a regular presence in the small yellow house. He would come for dinner, bringing groceries that Michelle would initially protest until he explained he wanted to contribute. He would help Natalie with her homework, discovering he had a knack for explaining math concepts in ways that made sense to a 7-year-old mind. He would watch movies with them, all three squeezed onto the old couch, Natalie inevitably falling asleep halfway through. Michelle and Erwin's relationship deepened. They talked about everything and nothing, from philosophy to pop culture, from fears to dreams. Michelle shared her worry about being a good enough mother, about giving Natalie the life she deserved. Erwin confessed his guilt about moving on from Irene, about feeling like he was betraying her memory by being happy again. "She would want you to be happy," Michelle said one evening. They were sitting on the porch after Natalie had gone to bed, the Tampa night warm and filled with the sound of crickets. Any woman who truly loved you would want you to live fully, not to bury yourself in grief. How did you become so wise? Erwin asked, reaching for her hand. Hardship teaches you things, Michelle replied, lacing her fingers through his. It shows you what matters. And you matter, Erwin. You matter to Natalie. You matter to me. It was the first time either of them had acknowledged what was growing between them. Erwin squeezed her hand, his heart pounding. You matter to me too, more than I thought possible. They sat in comfortable silence, hands intertwined, both aware that something was shifting, that they were moving toward something significant, something that could change everything. It was 2 months after that first park visit when Erwin asked Michelle on a proper date. He made a reservation at the finest restaurant in Tampa, a place with a Michelin star and a view of the bay. Michelle was nervous, borrowing a dress from a co-worker since she owned nothing appropriate for such a fancy venue. When Erwin picked her up, his breath caught at the sight of her, beautiful and elegant despite the borrowed dress. The restaurant was everything she had imagined places like this would be. Crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, waiters in tuxedos. She felt out of place at first, like an imposter in this world of wealth. But Erwin, sensing her discomfort, reached across the table and took her hand. You belong anywhere you choose to be, he said firmly. Never doubt that. They ordered food Michelle couldn't pronounce, laughed at the tiny portions that seemed ridiculous, and talked until the restaurant was preparing to close. Over dessert, a chocolate creation that was more art than food, Erwin became serious. Michelle, I need to be honest with you about what I'm feeling. I care about you. More than care. I'm falling for you. Falling hard. You and Natalie have brought light back into my life. You've reminded me what joy feels like, what hope feels like. I know I'm your boss, and I know that creates complications. I know we're from different worlds, but I can't pretend I don't feel this anymore. Michelle felt tears forming. I'm falling for you too. I tried not to. I told myself it was impossible, that we were too different, that I was being foolish. But Erwin, when you're with us, when you're with Natalie, when you look at me like you're looking at me right now, I feel like I'm finally home. Like all the struggle and pain was leading me to this moment. To you. Be with me, Erwin said, his voice intense. Officially. Be my girlfriend. Let me be a part of your and Natalie's lives. Let me take care of you both. Yes, Michelle said, smiling through her tears. Yes, I want that. I want all of that. Their first kiss happened right there in the fancy restaurant, with the waiters politely averting their eyes. It was soft and sweet, and full of promise, the kiss of two people who had found each other against all odds, who had been broken by life and were now healing together. The next few months were blissful. Erwin and Michelle navigated their relationship with care and respect. At work, they maintained professionalism, though everyone could see the change in both of them. Michelle glowed with happiness. Erwin smiled more, joked with his employees, seemed more human and less like the distant, sad figure he had been. Natalie was overjoyed. She had grown to love Erwin deeply, and knowing he and her mother were together officially made her feel like they were finally a real family. She started calling him Erwin sometimes and Dad in her head, though she wasn't brave enough to say it out loud yet. Erwin moved them out of the yellow house and into a beautiful townhouse he owned, bigger and safer, in a better school district for Natalie. Michelle initially protested, insisting she couldn't accept such generosity, but Erwin was firm. I want to do this, he said. I want to give you and Natalie security. Please let me. Their life found a rhythm. Erwin would pick Natalie up from school, help her with homework while Michelle finished work. They would cook dinner together, all three of them in the kitchen, laughing and talking. Weekends were for family activities, the zoo, the beach, the science museum. They were building a life together, building a family from the wreckage of their pasts. It was 4 months into their relationship when the past came crashing back in the ugliest way possible. Erwin and Michelle were sitting on the couch one evening, Natalie asleep upstairs, when Michelle's phone rang. She didn't recognize the number but answered anyway. Hello? Michelle, it's Diego. The voice sent ice through her veins. She stood abruptly, walking away from Erwin, her whole body tensing. What do you want? I heard about your new man. Rich CEO, huh? You've done well for yourself. How did you even get this number? I have my ways. Look, I want to see my daughter. I have a right to see her. You abandoned her 4 years ago. You have no rights. Actually, legally, I do. I'm still her father. And unless you want me to make trouble, I suggest we work something out. Something financial. To compensate me for all the years I've missed. Michelle felt rage unlike anything she had ever experienced. This is blackmail. Call it what you want, I'll be in touch with my lawyer. Unless you want to save us all some trouble and write me a check. Let's say 50,000, for starters. He hung up. Michelle stood there, shaking, the phone still pressed to her ear. Erwin was at her side in seconds, taking the phone from her trembling hands, guiding her back to the couch. What happened? Who was that? Diego, she whispered. He knows about us. He wants money. He's threatening to go for custody of Natalie if I don't pay him. Erwin's expression turned dark, a side of him Michelle had never seen. His voice was low and dangerous. Over my dead body. Erwin, he's her biological father. The courts might take his side. They might actually give him custody or at least visitation. I can't let him near her. He's not a good person. She doesn't even remember him. It would destroy her. Listen to me carefully, Erwin said, taking her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. I have resources. I have the best lawyers in Florida on retainer. This Diego doesn't know who he's messing with. I will not let him hurt you or Natalie. Do you understand me? I will protect you both with everything I have. True to his word, the next day Erwin contacted his legal team. They began building a case against Diego, documenting his abandonment, his failure to pay child support, his complete absence from Natalie's life. They hired private investigators who uncovered a string of questionable behavior, unpaid debts, association with unsavory characters, even some minor criminal charges that had been filed but never pursued. 2 weeks later, Diego's lawyer filed for partial custody. Michelle was devastated, barely able to function, but Erwin was her rock, steady and strong and absolutely certain they would win. The custody hearing was brutal. Diego showed up in a borrowed suit, playing the role of the reformed father who had made mistakes but wanted a second chance. His lawyer painted Michelle as unfit, citing her work hours, her relationship with her boss, trying to make it all seem sordid and inappropriate. But Erwin's team was better. They systematically destroyed Diego's case. They showed financial records proving he had never paid a cent of child support. They showed his criminal history. They called teachers and neighbors who testified to Michelle's exemplary parenting and Natalie's well-being. The clincher was when the judge asked to speak with Natalie privately. The 7-year-old was honest and clear. That man isn't my dad, she said simply. I don't know him. He never came to my birthdays or Christmases. He never helped when Mama cried about money. He was never there. But Erwin is there. He helps me with homework. He makes Mama smile. He's my family. The judge ruled in Michelle's favor. Diego was denied custody and visitation. Furthermore, given his obvious motivation being financial rather than paternal, and his attempt at extortion, the judge issued a restraining order. Diego was to stay at least 500 feet away from Michelle and Natalie at all times. Walking out of the courthouse, Michelle collapsed into Erwin's arms, sobbing with relief. It's over. It's finally over. I told you I'd protect you, Erwin murmured into her hair. I will always protect you both. Always. But it wasn't quite over. Diego, enraged by his loss and driven by greed and spite, wasn't ready to give up. He stewed in his anger, drinking, plotting, becoming increasingly unstable. He convinced himself that Michelle and Natalie had stolen his life, his chance at happiness, his potential wealth. 3 weeks after the court ruling, on a beautiful Sunday afternoon, Erwin took Michelle and Natalie to Bayshore Boulevard Park. The weather was perfect, with blue skies and a gentle breeze coming off Tampa Bay. The tree-lined path along the waterfront was perfect for an afternoon walk, and they had packed a picnic lunch to enjoy under one of the massive oak trees. Natalie ran ahead on the path, her new pink sneakers Erwin had bought her lighting up with each step. She chased seagulls and laughed, her pigtails bouncing in the breeze. She was wearing her favorite yellow sundress, the one with small daisies printed on it. Michelle and Erwin walked hand in hand behind her, enjoying the warmth of the sun and the joy of simply being together as a family. Other families passed them on the path, joggers, cyclists, elderly couples feeding the birds. It was an idyllic scene, perfect and peaceful. They didn't notice the figure watching them from behind one of the large oak trees about 50 yards ahead. They didn't see him taking long swigs from a flask, his eyes following Natalie's movements with predatory focus. They didn't know that Diego had been following them for days, learning their routines, waiting for his moment. The restraining order meant nothing to him now. He had lost everything. His chance at easy money, his legal claim to Natalie, any semblance of dignity or control. And in his twisted, alcohol-soaked mind, it was all their fault. Michelle's for moving on, Erwin's for playing hero, and even Natalie's for choosing them over him. Natalie wandered further ahead than usual, distracted by a particularly bold seagull that seemed willing to play with her. She was maybe 70 feet in front of her parents, far enough that the sounds of the park, the waves, the breeze, the other people, muffled her voice when she called back to them about the bird. Diego saw his opportunity, his heart pounding, fueled by rage and alcohol and desperation. He stepped out from behind the tree. His movements were quick despite his inebriation. He grabbed Natalie from behind, one arm wrapping around her small body, his other hand clamping over her mouth before she could scream. The little girl's eyes went wide with terror, her body going rigid with fear. "Shut up," Diego hissed in her ear, his breath reeking of whiskey. "You're coming with Daddy now. We're going to have a little talk about how you ruined everything." Natalie struggled, her small hands trying to pry his fingers from her mouth, her feet kicking uselessly. She tried to bite his hand, but his grip was too tight. Tears streamed down her face as panic overwhelmed her. This was the man from the courtroom, the man she had said she didn't want to see, the man her mama had protected her from. And now he had her. Michelle saw it first. One moment Natalie was chasing a bird. The next a man, Diego, had appeared and grabbed her. For a split second Michelle's mind couldn't process what she was seeing. Then reality crashed over her like a wave, and she screamed with a primal intensity that came from the deepest part of her soul. "Natalie, no, Diego, let her go." She started running, her sandals slapping against the pavement, her legs pumping as fast as they could. But Erwin was already moving. The moment he heard Michelle scream, his head had snapped around, and his body had reacted before his mind fully registered what was happening. He saw Diego, saw Natalie struggling in his grasp, and something ancient and primal erupted inside him. This man was threatening his daughter, his child, the little girl he loved more than his own life. Erwin ran faster than he ever had in his life, his long legs closing the distance with terrifying speed. Diego saw him coming and panic flashed across his face. He tried to run, backing away while dragging Natalie with him toward the parking lot where he had left his car. But he was out of shape, intoxicated, and burdened with a struggling child. Erwin was fueled by pure adrenaline, fear, rage, and desperate love. "Let her go," Erwin roared, his voice carrying across the park and drawing the attention of other parkgoers. Diego turned to run, but Erwin was on him. With a flying tackle that would have made his college football coach proud, Erwin brought Diego down hard onto the grass. The impact forced Diego to release Natalie, and she scrambled away, sobbing. "Run, Natalie, run to your mother!" Erwin shouted, not taking his eyes off Diego. The little girl ran, and Michelle caught her 20 feet away, dropping to her knees and pulling Natalie into her arms, holding her so tight it almost hurt. "You're safe, baby. You're safe. Mama's got you," she chanted over and over, even as she pulled out her phone with shaking hands to call 911. Meanwhile, Erwin pinned Diego to the ground. Diego thrashed and fought, throwing wild punches, spitting, cursing. "She's my daughter. Mine. You can't keep her from me. I have rights. You have no rights, Erwin growled, catching Diego's wrists and forcing them to the ground. His knee pressed into Diego's back, using his weight and strength to keep the man subdued. You abandoned her. You violated a restraining order. You just tried to kidnap a child. You're going to prison, you son of a bitch. Diego continued to struggle, but Erwin held firm. His heart was pounding, his hands shaking with adrenaline, but he didn't let go. He couldn't. If he let go, Diego might get to Natalie again, might hurt Michelle, might destroy their family. So he held on, his muscles screaming, his breath coming in gasps, but never loosening his grip. Other people in the park had noticed the commotion and were gathering, forming a loose circle but keeping their distance. A jogger, a large man in his 40s, came over to help. I've got his legs, he said to Erwin, grabbing Diego's ankles when he tried to kick. A woman was on her phone, also calling 911, providing additional witness testimony. Within 3 minutes, though it felt like an eternity, police sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Within 5, 2 patrol cars screeched into the parking lot, and 4 officers came running across the grass. In the aftermath, as they gave their statements to police, Natalie clung to Erwin like a lifeline. She was shaking, traumatized, tears streaming down her face. He tried to take me. He tried to take me away from you and Mama. But he didn't, Erwin said fiercely, hugging her tight. I will never let anyone hurt you. Never. You're my girl. You and your mama. You're my family. I love you, Dad, Natalie whispered. Erwin's breath caught. It was the first time she had called him that. Tears streamed down his face as he held her tighter. I love you too, sweetheart. So much. Michelle joined the embrace and they stood there, the 3 of them holding each other as police lights flashed and officers worked the scene around them. They were a family, forged in fire, bound by love deeper than blood. Diego was charged with attempted kidnapping, violation of a restraining order, and child endangerment. He was sentenced to 3 years in prison, and upon release, a permanent order barred him from ever contacting Michelle or Natalie again. He was finally truly out of their lives forever. The trauma of that day lingered, particularly for Natalie. She had nightmares for weeks, would wake up crying for Erwin and Michelle. They got her counseling, spent extra time with her, showered her with love and reassurance. Slowly, she healed, growing stronger from having overcome her fear. For Erwin and Michelle, the incident crystallized something they had both been feeling but hadn't voiced. They loved each other deeply, irrevocably. They were already a family in every way that mattered. It was time to make it official. 6 months after Diego's imprisonment, on a perfect Florida evening with the sun setting over Tampa Bay, Erwin took Michelle and Natalie to the beach. He had arranged everything carefully. The spot was decorated with candles and flowers. Soft music played from hidden speakers. Natalie was in on the secret, bouncing with barely contained excitement. When they reached the decorated area, Michelle gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Erwin, what is this? He took her hands, bringing her to the center of the candlelit space. Then, to her shock, he dropped to one knee. Natalie rushed to stand beside him, holding a small velvet box. Michelle Hughes, Erwin began, his voice thick with emotion. 6 months ago, a little girl with pigtails and an old pink dress walked into my office building and changed my life forever. She reminded me that goodness still existed in this world, that honesty and integrity weren't just concepts but living, breathing values. And then I met you, and you showed me that love could bloom even in the darkest soil, that a heart shattered by loss could be pieced back together, made stronger at the broken places. Michelle was crying, tears streaming freely down her face. You and Natalie have given me a reason to live again, to hope again, to dream again. You've made me a better man. You've shown me what family truly means, not blood, but choice, not obligation, but love. Michelle, I want to spend the rest of my life making you happy, protecting you both, being the father Natalie deserves and the husband you deserve. Will you marry me? He opened the box Natalie held, revealing a stunning diamond ring that caught the sunset and threw rainbows across Michelle's tearful face. Yes, Michelle sobbed. Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. Erwin slipped the ring onto her finger and stood, pulling her into a deep kiss. Natalie cheered and danced around them, then launched herself at both of them, and they all embraced, laughing and crying. Does this mean Erwin will officially be my dad? Natalie asked hopefully. If you'll have me, Erwin said, kneeling again to be at her level. I want to adopt you, if that's okay with you and your mom. I want to be your dad legally, officially, forever. Natalie threw her arms around his neck. Yes, I want that more than anything. The wedding was 3 months later, planned with care and love. Not a huge affair, but intimate and beautiful, exactly what Michelle and Erwin wanted. The guest list included close friends from the company, Natalie's teachers and favorite classmates, Mrs. Patterson, who had watched Natalie all those afternoons, and a few of Erwin's business associates who had become genuine friends over the years. About 70 people in total, all of whom had been touched by this love story in some way. The ceremony took place at sunset in the Sunken Gardens in St. Petersburg, a botanical paradise overlooking the bay. The gardens were lush with tropical plants, colorful flowers, and towering trees draped with Spanish moss. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange, pink, and purple, as if nature itself was celebrating their union. Rows of white chairs faced an arbor covered in white roses and jasmine, the sweet scent filling the air. Lanterns hung from the trees, ready to glow as twilight fell. Natalie was the flower girl, and she took her role seriously. She wore a pink princess dress that she had picked out herself, with layers of tulle and sparkles that caught the light. It was the fancy dress she had always dreamed of, and wearing it made her feel like she was in a fairy tale. Her blonde hair was styled in elegant curls with small white roses woven through. She carried a basket of rose petals, scattering them down the aisle with solemn concentration, her blue eyes focused on doing everything perfectly for her mama and Erwin. The string quartet began playing Pachelbel's Canon in D, and Erwin took his place at the altar. He wore a charcoal gray suit with a white rose boutonniere, and his hands trembled slightly as he clasped them in front of him. His best man, his longtime friend and CFO David Martinez, stood beside him, offering a supportive smile. Then the music shifted to 1,000 Years, and everyone stood as Michelle appeared at the end of the aisle. She wore a simple but elegant white dress, not a traditional wedding gown but a flowing white sundress that suited her perfectly. The dress had delicate lace details on the bodice and fell gracefully to her ankles. Her blonde hair was down in soft waves with a small crown of baby's breath flowers. She carried a bouquet of white roses and lavender, and she had never looked more beautiful. But it was her face that truly took Erwin's breath away. She was radiant, glowing with happiness, tears already shimmering in her eyes. As she walked down the aisle, unescorted because she had no father to give her away, she kept her eyes locked on Erwin. Every step brought her closer to the man who had saved her and Natalie, who had shown them what real love looked like, who had proven that second chances were real and beautiful. When she reached the altar, Erwin stepped forward to meet her. His vision was blurred with tears and he didn't care who saw them. He took her hands in his and they were both trembling. "You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. The officiant, a kind older man who had known Erwin's family for decades, smiled at the couple and began. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Erwin and Michelle, two souls who found each other in the most unexpected way, and whose love story reminds us all that hope and happiness can bloom even after the darkest seasons of our lives." The ceremony proceeded with readings from friends, including a poem about love and family that Natalie had helped choose. Then came the vows, the moment both Michelle and Erwin had been preparing for, the words they needed to say to each other. Erwin went first, his voice steady despite his tears. "Michelle, 3 years ago I thought my life was over. I thought I had lost my chance at happiness, at family, at love. I was surviving, but I wasn't living. Then a little girl with pigtails and the biggest heart I've ever known walked into my building and reminded me that goodness still exists in this world. And through her I found you. You've awakened parts of me I thought had died. You've shown me that the heart can love again, that it can grow and expand and make room for new dreams without dishonoring old ones. You are sunshine after rain, hope after despair, joy after sorrow. I promise to love you with everything I am for all the days of my life. I promise to be a partner to you, a father to Natalie, and a man worthy of the faith you've placed in me. I promise to choose you every single day in good times and in challenges, in laughter and in tears. You and Natalie are my family, my home, my everything. Today, I don't just gain a wife, I gain a daughter. And both of you are the greatest blessings I could ever receive. Michelle was crying openly now, tears streaming down her face as she listened to the man she loved pour his heart out. When it was her turn, she took a deep breath and spoke, her voice wavering but strong. Erwin, I've spent most of my adult life struggling, fighting, trying to survive and raise my daughter alone. I thought I had to be strong all the time, that asking for help was weakness, that being vulnerable meant being broken. Then you came into our lives and you taught me that true strength is allowing yourself to be loved, to accept help, to open your heart even after it's been hurt. You've shown me what partnership really means, what it looks like when someone chooses to stand beside you not because they have to, but because they want to. You've been a protector, a provider, but more than that, you've been a friend. You've given Natalie something I could never give her alone, a father's love. Watching you with her, seeing how gentle and patient and loving you are, fills my heart until I think it might burst. I promise to love you through good times and bad, through wealth and poverty, through sickness and health. I promise to be your safe place, your home, your partner in all things. I promise to honor the memory of the wife you lost, because she helped shape the incredible man you are, the man I love with all my heart. Today, we become a family, officially and forever. And I am so grateful, so incredibly grateful, that fate brought you to us. You are my answered prayer, my unexpected blessing, my forever love. There wasn't a dry eye in the garden. Even the officiant had to pause to compose himself before continuing. He led them through the exchange of rings, simple gold bands that they had chosen together, symbols of their eternal commitment to each other. Erwin, do you take Michelle to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part? I do, Erwin said firmly, his eyes never leaving Michelle's face. With all my heart I do. Michelle, do you take Erwin to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part? I do, Michelle said, smiling through her tears. Absolutely I do. By the power vested in me by the state of Florida, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Erwin, you may kiss your bride. At the reception, Erwin gave a toast. I lost my way for a while. I thought that when I lost Irene, I lost my chance at happiness, at family, at love. But then a little girl reminded me that integrity still exists in this world, that goodness is real, that there are people who value what's right over what's easy. And then I met a woman who showed me that the heart's capacity for love is infinite, that you can honor a past love while embracing a new future. To my wife Michelle and to my daughter Natalie, you are my second chance, my greatest blessing, my home. I love you both beyond measure. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. They moved into Erwin's mansion, though he had it renovated to make it feel more like a family home and less like a bachelor's mausoleum. Natalie got her dream bedroom, painted purple with a canopy bed and shelves full of books. Michelle and Erwin created a life of balance, work and play, quiet evenings and adventurous weekends, individual time and family time. Erwin officially adopted Natalie, and the day they went to court for the finalization, she wore her best dress and carried a single rose. When the judge declared that Natalie Hughes was now legally Natalie Kelly, she burst into tears of joy. I have a dad, she kept saying. I really have a dad. Life settled into a beautiful rhythm. Erwin cut back on his hours at work, delegating more, prioritizing time with his family. Michelle enrolled in community college to get her GED, then started taking business courses. Erwin supported her every step, helping her study, encouraging her dreams. Eventually, she joined the company in a management role, overseeing community outreach programs. Natalie thrived. She made new friends at her new school, joined the Girl Scouts, took piano lessons. She never forgot where she came from, though. She volunteered at food banks, donated her old toys to other children in need, and always remembered the lesson her mother taught her: to be honest, to be kind, to value integrity above all else. One evening, a year after the wedding, the three of them sat on the back patio of their home, watching the sun set over their pool, over their yard, over the life they had built together. Natalie was curled up between her parents, drowsy and content. "I'm happy," she murmured. "Really, truly happy." "Me too, baby," Michelle said, running her fingers through her daughter's hair. "Me three," Erwin added, pulling them both closer. They sat in comfortable silence, and Erwin thought about the journey that had brought them here. The wallet, the little girl with pigtails, the honest act that had changed everything. He thought about Irene, and he knew, deep in his soul, that she would be happy for him, that she would love Michelle and Natalie, that she would want him to live fully, to love completely, to embrace this second chance with both hands. "Thank you," he whispered, not sure if he was talking to Irene, to fate, to God, or to Michelle and Natalie. "For what?" Michelle asked softly. "For teaching me that honesty opens doors, that integrity matters, that love can be found in the most unexpected places, that family isn't about blood or biology, it's about choosing each other every single day." "No," Natalie said sleepily. "Thank you for choosing us." "Always," Erwin promised. "Always and forever." And as the stars began to appear in the Tampa sky, as the warm Florida breeze rustled through the palm trees, as the sounds of their neighborhood settling in for the night created a symphony of peace, the Kelly family sat together, whole and happy and home. The little girl who had once walked into a glass tower with a wallet and a heart full of honesty had done more than return lost property. She had returned a lost soul to the world of the living. She had shown that the values we instill in our children matter. She had proven that sometimes the smallest acts of integrity can lead to the greatest rewards, not material rewards, but love, family, belonging, home. And somewhere in the universe, perhaps Irene Kelly smiled, knowing that her beloved had found happiness again, that his dream of being a father had finally come true, that love had won, as it always does, when hearts are brave enough to try again. This was not the ending of their story, but rather a beginning, the start of a lifetime of love, laughter, challenges overcome together, and the deep, abiding joy that comes from being exactly where you're meant to be, with exactly who you're meant to be with, living the life you were always meant to live. "Mom taught me not to keep what isn't mine," Natalie had said that first day. And she had been right. But she had also taught the world that sometimes the greatest gifts are the ones we give away, the kindness we offer, the integrity we maintain, and the love we share. These are the things that come back to us, multiplied, transformed, made beautiful. This is the power of one honest heart. This is the magic of choosing right over easy. This is the miracle that happens when we dare to be good in a world that often rewards otherwise. This is their story, a story of redemption, of second chances, of love that heals, and families that are chosen, and futures that are bright with possibility. And it all started with a wallet, a little girl, and the simple truth that honesty, always and forever, is the best policy. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this beautiful love story. Let us know what you thought of this tale, full of emotions and surprises. Tell us your name, where you're watching from, and rate this story from 0 to 10 if it touched your heart. And if you enjoyed the plot, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the amazing new stories coming soon. See you next time.